Grab a stool, the conversation's about to begin at App TV's Sports Bar. Hello, I'm David Jackson. Welcome to Sports Bar and welcome back to campus for the beginning of the fall semester. Our panel is almost intact on this first day of class. Here are Chris Warner and Travis Stanley. Guys, welcome. Welcome back to school. Yeah. You guys are dressed up nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
You're trying to fit the part here as we get back to the fall semester. I know a lot of people, as they come back to campus, excited about App football. The season about 2.5 weeks away now from getting started. What's on you guys' radar screens in terms of the season ahead?
Well, I mean, I don't want to discount Howard as far as them being a good football team, but I just have bought my tickets for the Clemson game, so nice. I'm pretty excited about getting down there and seeing Death Valley for the first time. I want that game to be as competitive as it can be, but even if it doesn't go our way, still got to go to Death Valley. So all in all.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think and we've talked about this a little bit in the past here, but I think it's going to be a closer game than everybody's given the chance to be. I know that it's only our second year in Division I, but at the same time, this is a very talented team that App's fielding this year. And Clemson lost a lot on defense. And so if you play a game like App State does, where you can run the ball effectively and you can keep their offense, which is where the majority of their experience is and the majority of their weapons are, you have the ability to really change a game. And when you're in Death Valley, it's got to be the game plan if you're Coach Satterfield.
Well, and the difference here in this game versus some of the other games that App's played in this regard over the last few years is going to be the depth factor. And now in that second year moving into the FBS, you have roughly 20 more scholarship players available. And those are good, talented players. So things like special teams. When App's played these games before, you see that second, third quarter period where you can only go ones on one so long. You bring in those twos and there's a sizable drop off, or in some cases your twos are worn down by the threes and fours on the other side. And now the numbers game at least stacks up to hopefully benefit Appalachian in that regard.
You bring up special teams. Even last year, when they got on that roll, won those 6 games, and in a game like Troy, where, for the most part, they dominated that game start to finish. I'm pretty sure they still gave up a kickoff return or punt return for touchdown. So just even in games where they were dominating, special teams was still kind of letting them down. They were lucky enough to hit that field goal against Monroe last year and win that ball game. But certainly special teams, I hope, are more solidified.
Huge area of concern, certainly, and that's been one of the better battles in camp thus far. Zach Maddox is the heir apparent, I guess, or the incumbent, if you will, to the kicking spot. But then Michael Rubino, who's a very talented freshman, chose Appalachian over Penn State back in January, and actually enrolled early in campus at that point at the beginning of the winter term. He has been right on Maddox's heels so far in the fall. So those two guys are pushing each other pretty well. I think the bigger thing with special teams is the alignment concerns. And again, you go back to depth there, where you're not necessarily putting a group of walk-ons out in those positions anymore to try to spell your starters, or in some cases, knowing that you're going to have to put your starters out there for those 5 to 7 more live reps a game. Now you've got talented second-team guys on the defensive side, and in some cases some of those offensive sides, that have been able to fill those roles, and the speed and athleticism that you're now recruiting at the FBS level. That all makes a difference. I think it's an important piece of the puzzle that gets overlooked because it's special teams, and who cares? But that aspect is going to be very important for Appalachian's chances going forward.
Yeah, and especially when you play teams like Clemson, where the athletes are going to be not superior necessarily to what App has, but these are going to be some of the best athletes that App will see this season. giving up a special teams touchdown or something, that could be the game, honestly. If you're playing a possession game where you're trying to keep the ball as much as you can, one play like that can just unseal all the momentum for App, and then all of a sudden you have Clemson's offense, picking up where the special teams left off. It's something that they really have to keep under control if they hope to win the game.
I hope the rugby kick is something we're not working on. I don't know if it is. I've never been a fan of the rugby style kick. I think of Critcher's rugby style kick against Arkansas State. They took back. It was just a horrendous kick. The guy was doing his best, and he had to get it off real quick. And I understand, but I just don't like that style of kicking. I hope that's something that we're kind of moving away from.
New element to the coordinating game of special teams, Stu Holt, who came from South Florida. It was very successful in special teams alignment down there. So we'll see. I haven't necessarily seen the rugby kick yet, but it's special teams, so you never know. One of the things that has stood out, though, is the play of Ronald Blair thus far in camp. And you're talking about a guy that fits the bill. 5 months in the offseason spent in the weight room, and this guy, he just looks the part now. And he's a guy that is obviously key to Appalachian keeping the pass rush going, but a guy that just looks like he's really embraced the opportunity and to get himself bigger. And with that, there have been a lot of NFL scouts around during camp, not only watching him, watching Malachi Jones, those two probably first and foremost on the roster, but those guys have got a chance to play on Sundays if they have a good year this year.
Well, Ronald Blair, he's been around a while, so he's definitely had like you say, the time in the weight room to develop his body, get bigger. As far as Malachi goes, he also has the size.
Absolutely.
He needs to get the touches. He's in a wide receiver group that's one of the most talented position groups I think we have on the team. Right with running back. But I think he'll get plenty of looks, and I wish those guys the best. I think both have legitimate, like you say, NFL
well,
prospects.
That's one of the reasons, like you mentioned, Malachi's size and limited opportunity for reps. That's one of the reasons the scouts are there now.
Yeah.
They want to see how these guys work. They know Blair will get his time on tape, and certainly Malachi is in a position as a senior to be the top pass catcher in terms of receptions, and he will be playing that prime receiving position to get the ball delivered his way more frequently. But you're right. You got legitimately 8 deep at receiver, and you could probably take that down to 10. There have been some of these freshmen and redshirt freshmen that have really stepped forward. Zy Letman comes in out of junior college from Georgia Military. He's been fantastic. Jaquil Capel's probably had the camp of anybody at receiver, and he was somebody that was kind of almost forgotten in a sense because he came in with a lot of hype. Some people jumped him on the depth chart. Now all of a sudden he's jumped back in front again. So if you're Taylor Lamb, if you're Daniel David or J.P. Caruso, you've got a variety of weapons to go to, and that's not counting tight end. That's not counting throwing to the running backs out of the backfield. So you could play 10. You could have 10 snaps and get the ball to 10 different weapons without question within the context of this offense this year.
Who do we think is pushing the number 2 spot at quarterback? I would assume Taylor Lamb's got that pretty locked up.
Yeah, he's got that pretty locked up. I'd say that it's a dead heat right now between Daniel David, who's a true freshman that came in, and J.P. Caruso, who was here as a redshirt last year. They both got big arms. With those big arms and their youth comes some inaccuracy issues right now that they're working through. Both guys, like Taylor, can impact the game with their feet, and Caruso and David both have shown that prototypical Appalachian quick burst out of the quarterback spot in the run game. So again, another facet to have to defend against, but those two guys are going to spend the bulk of the next, I'd say, week to 10 days getting as many reps as they possibly can before Howard prep really truly starts to try to get some delineation in that 2 and 3 spot.
Possibly redshirting, maybe a Jake Easter potentially.
Yeah. There are opportunities here too. There are 6, if I'm not mistaken, 6 quarterbacks in camp right now, and position switches at some point in time will be something that someone will have to deal with, and who that someone is right now. Certainly, Easter's got he's probably the second fastest guy, only to Capel on the team right now in terms of just breakaway speed. So whether he sticks at the quarterback spot, whether you find a place for him in another playmaking role on either side of the ball, who knows? There are a couple other guys that are a little further down the depth chart that will probably fall into that scout team quarterback role. But it's certainly a crowded position room right now. But I'll also say, too, going back to the top of the depth chart, Taylor Lamb has got a great touch on his deep ball right now. He had a couple of passes in the scrimmage Saturday that indicate that his timing is right where it needs to be. Certainly some areas that he still wants to work on over the next few weeks. But I think for the first time in a while, you'll see an Appalachian quarterback that took the stranglehold on a position, say in year one, that second year is going to have an opportunity to take a real step forward. And that hasn't, really, you go back to Armani Edwards was the last guy that had the torch, and he advanced the torch forward the next year. We've had kind of a quarterback turnstile, if you will, of talent.
Well, you look at a guy like DeAndre Presley from a few years back who played very well. I believe it was his junior season, but then as a senior ended up playing cornerback.
He was the preseason #1 QB, All-American in the country, and ended up playing defense by the end of the year. Wow. But that's where Jamal Jackson came from, and then Cam Bryant emerged in the same situation with Jamal. So you never know. I mean, and that's also a tip to this coaching staff. Will say the best players will play, regardless of height, age, whatever. So you've got to put your team in the best case to win, and then that's what those two transactions allowed Appalachian to do.
Well, overall, I'm just hearing about the offense. You have more insight than anyone about that, but I'm not extremely worried about us being able to put up points. Defensively, I would assume that I have more question marks personally about defense. I mean, I think the spine. We mentioned Blair, John Law, Middleton. I think that's good. Up. The core group there and those position groups are good. There's still a lot of young guys on the defense that I'm not exactly sure about.
Yeah, but I think when you have really solid players like Blair, if you can generate a pass rush, it'll mask the inefficiencies from the guys who aren't necessarily your top players. And so if Blair can really set the tempo and set the expectation early on in the season that, hey, we're going to be in your face all game long, it makes it a lot easier for corners to be running around out there when they're just quarterbacks are having to chuck up balls because they're going to be on their back if they don't. And hopefully they can get that set early, in a game versus Howard, where you're probably going to be able to just physically dominate who they have out there for the most part, get that expectation and that tempo set, and hopefully carry that into Clemson.
You look at the linebacking core, I would say two guys to watch for this year would be Eric Boggs at that other inside linebacker position along with Law, a breakout year candidate here, a guy that was an all-freshman team style player last year. And then on the outside of the linebacking core, looking at a guy that's a little bit of a hybrid. He's played some D-end, he's played some linebacker, but wherever they put him on the field, Wally Dada is going to have an opportunity there. I think probably you'll see him more on the front line than you will at linebacker. Ozzie Sambo's another one. Guys that aren't necessarily household names just yet. Dada probably the most out of that group that I just mentioned. But those guys, again, to your point about Blair initiating the pass rush, those guys become very solid complementary weapons to that aspect. And I'll say in the 11-on-11 and in the scrimmage Saturday, certainly, this defense looks like they're going to come out with the tempo cranked up in terms of the pass rush. That was something they were a little bit more passive with early in the season last year, based on youth. Remember they started 4 true freshmen last year, so you can only blitz so much. You got to make sure those guys know where to go.
Exactly.
But once that familiarity came into play, you're talking about a group that ended up finishing in the top 30 in the country in sacks. So if they can get out to that same pace to start the year, I think that'll be a very important part of the arsenal.
Yeah, that aggressiveness on defense is really what helped propel them. Early in the season, sometimes it was kind of hard to watch because they're, giving them 5 yards on every play, cushion-wise, if they're throwing the ball. It wasn't very strong up the middle. You mentioned Eric Boggs. He personally reminds me of kind of like a Carl Anderson, except he's bigger and I think he's faster.
He wears the 45,
and he does wear the 45. So I think he's. He reminds me personally of Carl.
Carl Anderson interviewed him on our ESPN3 Media Day broadcast a few weeks ago, and I mean Eric towers over Carl.
Yeah, no, he's considerably larger.
The mailman towers over Carl. So, but that's been a difference too in the FBS nature of all of this. You look at these guys, offensive line, defensive line, it stands out a lot more. But even at the skill positions, guys are bigger, they're physically more imposing, they're quicker, and people wonder where those subtle differences become. I think this is a not so subtle difference. When you see these guys out on the field for the first time, you're going to see a noticeable difference in all of the measurables that make FBS football just a little bit of a different brand than what we've seen before.
Yeah, and well, FCS football, I somewhat worry about the health of that league. I mean, you still have, powers like Montana, Montana State, several others, Eastern Washington. But with Appalachian leaving, Georgia Southern leaving, those are two huge hits for that league. So I really enjoyed FCS football. The playoffs, having a real chance to win. So I really hope that continues to be profitable for many of those universities.
You hit the right term there. It's going to be all about the money. And the money does not look good for FCS right now, and that's certainly going to be a factor to watch for. Switching gears a bit here to the NFL, preseason is here. We were all able to stomach preseason week 1
for 1 week at least.
But I think the big shot heard around, or punch heard around the locker room there leading up to that first game, Geno Smith. What a train wreck of a situation. Not only to get your starting quarterback knocked out in the locker room, but then the guy goes and signs with the
Buffalo Bills.
So yeah, I want your insider's take on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when the report first came out, it was Geno Smith got sucker punched in the face and he's this total victim. And then a couple hours later, as information gets out, you kind of find out he kind of earned it. I mean, when you look at it, he was in the guy's face, pointing in his face in the locker room, and one thing that really stood out to me when it all happened is no veterans of the team stepped up and were like, oh, this is unbelievable. The coaches did and said that it's ridiculous and that, this isn't called for. But typically, if someone's really in the wrong, you'll see the vets defend him. And nobody did that for Geno Smith. So you knew something was up. And in my opinion, he kind of earned it. And, it's not right to get in fights in the locker room. And when you're talking about a team who the Patriots might be down this year, the division is more open this year than it has been for, 10 years. And now you lose your starting quarterback for 6 to 10 weeks.
Well, I mean, you mentioned no one came to his defense. Darrelle Revis did the exact opposite. He called a press conference and was like, hey, guys, this is ridiculous, and both of these were at fault. And that was all he had to say, but he just wanted the public to know that, his take on things. When I first heard the report, you mentioned how information continued to leak out. I thought, there's got to be something more to this than $600 or whatever it was. These guys make millions of dollars. And they're in the locker room. This couldn't just be it. So I think certainly Geno's mouth helped him win a broken jaw.
More than mouth didn't help him do too much. Use it anymore.
And and for Geno Smith, they were already not. They weren't feeling like Geno Smith was going to come out and take the whole league by storm. It's kind of they're in this middle ground where they don't know what they have. And now, if you're Geno Smith, running your mouth potentially lost you your career. I hate to be that blunt, but. Why should they give you a chance?
It's going to be a locker room cancer issue.
Yeah. Why would they give you another chance?
If you're going to get a locker room dust up, just don't get your face broken.
Yeah.
That's the moral
you're the quarterback.
Well,
or have enough protection.
Yeah, exactly.
I've listened to some other people's comments on this story, and I think a few of the people I listened to had some good thoughts. They were saying if this would have happened out on the field, maybe no one gets hurt, but they get into a fight. Then you're just talking about like how gritty your quarterback is, or how gritty the team is.
Cam Newton was in a fight earlier that week.
Exactly, and especially if the Jets organization, particularly, that's how it would have went down.
Yep.
If no one would have gotten hurt, particularly if it hadn't been your quarterback, this would have just been a non-issue.
Yep.
So I don't know what that tells us about how we feel about fighting on football teams.
In camp, fights aren't that uncommon, though. But the difference is that what happens on the field happens on the field, and it stays there. Because when you go to the locker room, it's a different environment. You're a team at that point. Out on the field, when you've got someone across from you, you're playing that guy. And you know what? When you take a sucker punch to the face, you're wearing a helmet so you don't break your jaw.
But the thing is, too, is the severity of the injury has a lot to do with this, too. If Geno Smith gets punched in the face and his whole face doesn't break, we never hear about this. There's a very big part of that whole what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room type thing. Unless you get your face completely broken and miss 6 to 8 weeks. You can't explain your way out of that one. So, again, if the punch wasn't as massive or as forceful, then how many times do these things go on in a locker room in the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball, whatever? You don't hear about it, but it is a part of just the nature of, guys being guys and being in those close quarters and tempers being, on edge because of the time of year that you're involved in.
Well, I think it's Geno Smith, you mentioned this is, possibly career threatening, and I think it might be, especially if he doesn't show, really well once he does get back to playing. I think he's fortunate that he plays for the Jets and Fitzpatrick is going to be the starter behind him. I mean, I'm not ruling out Fitzpatrick plays like a world beater. Maybe he will, but I don't think he will. I think it's doubtful.
Fan, it's probably doubtful.
Yeah, so, I think he is somewhat fortunate there. But certainly, if he doesn't play well in however many weeks he has left in that season, and he gets dropped, I don't think too many people are going to be running, thinking, oh, we got to pick up that Geno Smith guy.
You're kind of an angsty Bills fan today.
Oh, well, well, this is the thing. You go through all these years, I feel for the Jets because they have Chan Gailey as their offensive coordinator and they have Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's what I saw. I can't even remember when 2010, I think, was when Chan Gailey was the coach, and I've been there on the Fitzpatrick hype, like, oh, maybe this is finally when he turns the corner and becomes the elite quarterback. You know what you're getting with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Proof positive. We talked about this before the show. Proof positive that in the NFL there are only like 12 guys that get jobs. Quarterbacks and coaches.
Josh McCown, in and out of the league. Brian Fitzpatric. Matt Castle.
Yeah. Tim Tebow. Before the broadcast.
Dude was sitting at a desk like we are. All year last year, and now he's back in it. Panthers preseason. They'll play their second game this weekend against the Dolphins after practicing against Miami all week. Interesting thing that came out of this past weekend's game, and certainly Carolina didn't necessarily light the world on fire offensively, especially to start their preseason opener against the Bills. The NFL took it a little far, and on Saturday put out an email to subscribers of one of their email newsletters, a picture of Cam Newton, and the underneath it there was a box, and in that box was written "Cam equals inconsistency?" ? That riled up the Panthers camp a little bit, but is this now what Cam Newton should expect based on the contract that he signed in the offseason, that he's going to be under the microscope even more so than he already was to be able to deliver at an elite quarterback level?
I think so, but one of the things about the Cam Newton extension is it didn't really strike me as saying, yes, he's a franchise quarterback, don't get me wrong, but he kind of got the contract that's the going rate to be a franchise quarterback. It wasn't like he was that far above Andy Dalton. People forget Colin Kaepernick is making a massive deal.
And he didn't set the market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it sucks for him that he's going to get this pressure like that. I didn't think he played that bad, honestly. And you're talking about playing a Bills defense that was very solid last year, led the league in sacks, so pressure being in his face was no surprise. And he still performed okay. It's preseason. It's too early for, the NFL does that, I'm sure, to just generate buzz. That's what it is.
Get guys like us to talk.
Yeah, exactly. And it works. But I don't think by any stretch that we need to worry that much about a preceason performance.
That came out for two reasons. One, we're starved for football.
Yeah.
We're willing.
Nothing's happening with Tom Brady.
We're willing to cling to anything. Yeah. And two, people haven't gotten over the shock of the market value, like you said, the going rate of the starting quarterback. They don't have to be putting up Tom Brady, Peyton Manning numbers to get this kind of money anymore, because if you're not paying them that kind of money, then they're just going to go somewhere else that will.
And Michael, just kind of moving along the topic, so we only got a few minutes left. Michael Orr looked good the other night.
Yeah.
And that's an important part for the whole Cam Newton thing to work. Period. You got to have the blind side protected.
And they got him at a pretty good discount. I mean, considering how he fell out with the Titans after getting a massive extension, it was kind of one of those things. Take a shot, see what he can do, and he's stepping up.
Yeah, I was a little indecisive about them picking Orr up from Tennessee because I watched him play some, and then I went back and watched quite a bit more once I heard that they picked him up, because I was like, I don't know about this. Byron Bell wasn't he wasn't the answer.
No answer
I didn't know if Orr would be any better, but
Other winners and losers from preseason?
I thought Funchess, if we're sticking with
Yeah.
the
Kelvin
Panthers,
Benjamin.
I thought, I thought they both
Benjamin
showed
looked
well.
in shape for the first
Yeah.
time. I know Sam has talked about that being an issue, but
Yeah.
he looked the part.
Yeah, he did. And he kind of reminds me of like Plaxico Burress, if you guys remember when he was in the league. Practice, you always heard like, oh, he doesn't look good. He doesn't look himself. But then game time, he shows up. So if they can get that, that's really what matters anyway.
6'6", just doesn't go away overnight.
Yeah,
so-
exactly.
No, I
still
agree with
have
you. Funchess, I thought, he's going to be kind of like Kelvin Benjamin, I think, last year, too, where right out of the gate might be a little slow to get started, but give him till about week 4, and that's a guy that you can really deliver the ball to.
With him, Benjamin, Olsen, I think they'll have at least 3 solid guys. Maybe put Ted Ginn in there.
Yeah.
The receiving core should be better for them than.
I think Ted Ginn could be the key to the whole thing for the first month. He's a guy that brings a calming influence on what is still a very young receiving core. If you take Jericho out of that deal, but you're talking about your 2 primary weapons are awfully young. To have a settling influence like Ginn, not only at the receiving position but also in special teams, they need a return weapon badly, and he's the guy that can service all of those needs to get them out to a good start.
Certainly, still the only person on that wide receiver roster that can run by a defensive back. So,
and there's something to be said that he came back to Carolina, because a lot of guys, when they go off in the league, he just strikes me as someone who, once he's comfortable playing where he's at, he'll step up. Because he's never fulfilled his potential. He was a top pick. Yeah. But Carolina is the best I've seen him play in his entire career in his time there.
Well, and he even said when they played the Cardinals in the playoffs last year, it felt like he never left and wanted to pack his bags and head to the locker room. So we'll see how the Panthers fare with Miami in week number 2 in preseason play. We'll talk about that game, I'm sure, right here next week. It's last call on Sports Bar, but before we close, we'd like to invite you to contact us with your comments. You can do that at watchapptv.com. Until next time, I'm David Jackson.